A single piece of wood can build a beautiful home, or it can completely destroy a family. My father, Thomas, was a master carpenter. He was a tall, scary man with rough hands. Everyone respected his amazing talent. But to me, he was just a cold, cruel monster. I am Leo, his only son. I spent my whole childhood trying to make him smile. I worked in his dusty wood shop every day after school. I wanted to be a great artist like him. But he never praised me. He only shouted and called me stupid. For his 50th birthday, I wanted to give him a perfect gift. I spent 30 long nights awake in the dark. I secretly built a beautiful wooden chair. I carved every detail with deep love and care. I thought this chair would finally make him proud of me. I nervously brought the chair to him on his birthday morning. He looked at it with cold, empty eyes. He did not say thank you. He did not smile. He picked up a heavy metal axe from the table. Without a single word, he swung the axe down hard. The sharp axe split my beautiful chair completely in half. I stood there, frozen in absolute shock. He picked up the broken pieces of wood and threw them directly into the burning fireplace. My heart broke into a million pieces. My love for him burned away to ash. "This is useless garbage," he said with a cruel voice. "You have no talent, Leo. You are a weak dreamer. You will never be a master like me." He turned his back and walked away. I cried silent tears, feeling a deep, dark anger growing inside my soul. But something very strange happened later that exact same afternoon. Thomas called his head carpenter into the office. The head carpenter was an old, loyal man. He had worked for my father for 20 years. They were best friends. Suddenly, I heard loud shouting from the small room. My father opened the door and pushed the old man out. "You're fired," my father yelled angrily. "Pack your tools and never come back here." The old carpenter looked completely shocked and confused. He walked out of the shop with sad tears in his eyes. It made absolutely no sense. Why would my father fire his best worker on his birthday? I did not know the secret truth. The old carpenter had accidentally seen something terrible in the shop earlier that morning. He saw my father drop a heavy hammer on the floor. The old man saw my father's strong hand shaking violently. It was shaking so badly he could not hold his tools. My father fired his best friend to keep a dark, terrifying secret hidden from the world. He was building a wall of silence around his own life. I did not understand his secret pain. I only saw a cruel man destroying everything around him. I wiped my tears and looked at the burning fire. I decided I would prove him wrong. I would become the greatest designer in the world, just to crush his pride. For years past, I studied extremely hard at the city's best design university. I never went home for holidays. I wanted to be perfect. On graduation day, I stood on the stage holding my gold medal. I was the top student in my entire class. I looked into the large crowd, hoping to see my father's face. I hoped my gold medal would finally earn his respect. But his seat was completely empty. He did not come. I felt a familiar, sharp pain in my chest. I took a train back to our hometown. I walked toward our family wood shop with my heavy bags. I expected to hear the loud sounds of cutting wood. But the shop was strangely quiet. A large truck was parked outside the front door. A stranger was carrying out my grandfather's antique woodworking machines. I ran inside, completely panicked. My father was standing there, counting a thick stack of dirty money. He was selling our family history to a cheap scrap metal buyer. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "Those tools belong to our family. They are my future inheritance." Thomas looked at me with cold, tired eyes. He did not look at my shiny gold medal. He walked past me and grabbed my heavy bags. He dragged them outside and threw them violently into the dirty street. My clothes and books spilled everywhere in the dust. "You have no inheritance here," he said with a cruel, flat voice. "I sold the entire shop this morning. I sold the land and the business to the big furniture corporation in the city. There is absolutely nothing left for you. This place is gone forever." I was completely paralyzed by shock. The family shop was my only dream. Why would you sell it to a giant corporation? I cried loudly. "I am a graduate now. I can run this business and make it better. I have amazing new designs." He laughed a harsh, bitter laugh. "You are just a useless, stupid boy," he said. "Your paper degree means absolutely nothing. You are a weak parasite. I want you to leave my town. Go away and never come back. You are no longer my son." The scrap metal buyer watched us with wide, nervous eyes. My father turned his back and locked the heavy wooden doors of the empty shop. He locked me out of his life completely. I stood alone in the street, surrounded by my dirty, scattered clothes. I did not cry this time. The sadness in my heart instantly turned into a boiling, dark fire. He wanted to destroy me, but he had just given me a dangerous weapon. He had given me pure, absolute hatred. I picked up my bags from the dust. I swore a silent promise to the empty shop. I would build a massive empire. I would become richer and more powerful than the corporation that bought his business. One day, I would return and crush my father under my feet. I walked away without looking back. The big city was loud, cold, and incredibly expensive. I rented a tiny, dirty room with no heating. I ate cheap noodles every single day. But I did not care about the pain. I was completely focused on building my own furniture design company. I drew hundreds of modern, beautiful designs on cheap paper. My designs were fresh and completely unique. I needed money to start production. I put on my only clean suit and walked confidently into the biggest bank in the city. I showed them my brilliant business plan. The bank manager smiled and seemed very impressed. He typed my name into his computer to check my credit history. Suddenly, his smile vanished completely. He looked at me with deep suspicion. He closed my folder and pushed it back across his large, shiny desk. "I am sorry, Leo," the manager said coldly. "We cannot lend you any money. Your father called our main office yesterday. He warned us that you are irresponsible and have a serious gambling problem. He officially put your name on the severe financial blacklist." I could not breathe. My own father was still trying to destroy me from far away. He was actively hunting my dreams to kill them. I visited 5 different banks that week. Every single bank rejected me because of his cruel, terrible phone calls. I sat on a park bench in the freezing rain. I had no money left for food. My shoes had holes in them. My father had one. I was completely defeated. I was ready to give up and accept my fate as a poor, useless failure. The next morning, a sleek black car stopped outside my cheap apartment. A man in a sharp suit knocked on my door. He handed me a thick, expensive envelope. It was from a mysterious, private venture capital firm. I had never heard of their name before. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a massive, unbelievable contract. They were offering me $2 million to start my company. They did not want to control my business. They only wanted a small percentage of my future profits. It was a miracle. I read the documents very carefully. The investment firm was secretly owned by the exact same giant corporation that bought my father's shop. A dark, twisted smile appeared on my face. This was absolute, perfect karma. The enemy of my enemy was my new best friend. I signed the heavy contract immediately. I believed the rival corporation wanted to use my modern designs to destroy my father's traditional legacy. I was incredibly happy to help them. I used the $2 million to rent a huge factory and hire the best workers. I worked 20 hours a day. I used my burning hatred as endless fuel. Every beautiful chair I built was a weapon against my father. I was completely blind to the truth. I did not know that the mysterious investment firm was actually a beautiful, tragic lie. 7 years passed in a busy blur of massive success. My company grew into a powerful, international furniture empire. I was a millionaire CEO. I wore expensive suits and drove a luxury sports car. Everyone in the business world knew my name and respected my designs. But the dark anger in my heart never disappeared. It was time for my ultimate revenge. I called a meeting with the giant corporation that funded my startup. I was so rich now, I wanted to buy their entire business. I wanted to own my father. I sat across from the old CEO of the corporation. I pushed a massive check across the table. I want to buy the small wood shop you purchased from Thomas 7 years ago, I said coldly. I want to personally fire him today. Give me the contract. The old CEO looked at the check, and then he looked at me in total confusion. He frowned and shook his head slowly. I am sorry, Leo, he said politely. But I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. We never bought a wood shop. I froze. That is impossible, I argued. My father told me he sold his business to you. You are the parent company of my secret investment firm. The CEO sighed heavily. Leo, we do not own that investment firm. It is a completely independent, anonymous trust. My mind spun in wild circles. The CEO opened a file on his computer. I remember your father now, the old man said quietly. He came to my office 7 years ago. He begged me to buy his shop, but we rejected his offer. It was too small. If the corporation never bought his shop, who did? And where did my $2 million really come from? I grabbed my car keys and ran out of the tall building. My heart was beating incredibly fast. I drove my sports car directly toward my old hometown. I sped down the familiar highway. I wanted to grab my father and demand the truth. I finally reached the small, quiet town. I parked my expensive car on the dusty street. I walked quickly toward the corner where our busy family wood shop used to stand. I stopped walking and gasped in pure shock. The large, wooden building was completely gone. There was no busy factory. There were no workers. There was only a flat, empty dirt lot surrounded by a rusty wire fence. Tall, wild grass grew everywhere in the quiet dirt. It looked like a dead graveyard. Our family history was completely erased from the earth. I asked a neighbor what happened to the business. The neighbor looked at me with sad eyes. He told me the building was torn down many years ago. Thomas had vanished like a ghost. Nobody in the town knew where he went. The master carpenter simply disappeared into the dark shadows. I stood in the empty dirt, feeling completely lost. My perfect plan for revenge was falling apart. The real mystery had just begun. I left the empty dirt lot and drove quickly to my childhood home. It was a beautiful, traditional house with a large garden. I expected to see my father sitting on the porch. I marched up the wooden steps, ready to shout and demand the hidden truth. I knocked loudly on the heavy front door. A young woman opened it. She was holding a small baby. A strange dog barked in the hallway. The house was painted a completely different color inside. I stepped back, confused by the unfamiliar, strange faces looking at me. "Where is Thomas?" I asked aggressively. "Where is my father?" The young woman looked at me with wide, nervous eyes. "I am sorry," she said softly. "There is no Thomas here. My husband and I bought this house from the bank exactly 6 years ago." 6 years ago? My brain struggled to understand the timeline. That meant my father lost the house just 1 year after I left for the city. "He sold it to the bank?" I asked quietly. "Yes," the woman nodded. "He sold it for an incredibly cheap price." Why would a proud master carpenter sell his home and his shop for pennies? The woman suddenly remembered something. "Wait here," she said. She walked into the house and quickly returned holding a small, dirty envelope. The paper was old, yellow, and covered in thick dust. "When we bought the house, the bank gave us this envelope," she explained. "They said if a man named Leo ever came looking for his father, we should give it to him. We kept it in a drawer for 6 long years." She handed it to me. I took the envelope with shaking fingers. My name was written on the front in my father's familiar, messy handwriting. I tore the top open. There was no letter inside. There were no angry words or apologies. There were only 2 strange items hidden in the paper. I pulled out a heavy, rusty metal key. It felt cold and rough in my hand. Then I pulled out a small, folded piece of official paper. It was a printed receipt from a cheap, public storage facility located far away on the dark edge of town. The receipt showed that a small, dark storage room was rented 6 years ago. The rental fee was paid in full in hard cash for 10 continuous years. It was a prepaid, secret hiding place. My father had left this final clue for me to find today. I thanked the woman and walked slowly back to my car. I held the rusty key tightly in my fist. Was this a trap? Was he hiding his secret wealth in that room? Or was he living in a dark storage unit like a crazy, broken old man? The sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows over the quiet town. I started the engine of my expensive car. I drove toward the lonely edge of the city. I was finally going to open the door to my father's deepest, most dangerous secret. The public storage facility was a sad, lonely place surrounded by a tall metal fence. The yellow streetlights flickered weakly in the cold wind. I found the correct door number in a dark, quiet alley. I pushed the rusty metal key into the heavy, old lock. The lock clicked loudly. I pulled the heavy metal door upward. It made a terrible, screaming sound. The room inside was pitch black. I expected to see mountains of stolen money, expensive antique furniture, or maybe a dangerous trap. I slowly turned on my phone's bright flashlight. The beam of light cut through the thick, gray dust. The room was completely empty. There were no boxes, no money, and no secrets. My heart sank in disappointment. But then, I moved the light toward the very center of the cold, concrete floor. I stopped breathing. Sitting perfectly in the middle of the empty room was a single wooden chair. I walked toward it with slow, shaking steps. My eyes widened in absolute shock. It was exactly the same beautiful, detailed chair I had designed and built for him 7 years ago. But it was not my chair. He had destroyed my chair with an axe. This was a perfect, identical copy. The master carpenter had studied my design perfectly. He had recreated my masterpiece with incredible love and care. Why would he build the chair he hated so much? I gently touched the smooth, polished wood. I remembered my own design perfectly. I knew there was a secret, hidden compartment under the main seat. I reached my fingers under the wood and pushed a small, hidden button. The wooden panel clicked open with a soft sound. Inside the dark compartment, I found a thick, brown folder. I pulled it out and opened it in the dusty light. The first paper was a formal, government document with a heavy black border. It was an official death certificate. The name printed on it was Thomas. He was dead. My father had died completely alone in a cheap hospital exactly 4 years ago. The powerful man I hated, the enemy I wanted to destroy, was already gone. I felt a sudden, crushing emptiness in my chest. But the nightmare was not over yet. Under the death certificate was a stack of hospital medical records. The papers were stamped with bright red, urgent ink. I read the terrifying diagnosis. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis ALS. Terminal stage. It was a cruel, deadly disease that slowly destroys every muscle in the human body. The dates on the medical papers shocked me deeply. He was diagnosed with this terrible, fatal illness on the exact same month I graduated from the design university. He knew he was going to die a slow, painful, paralyzed death when he threw me out of the house. The dark pieces of the puzzle began to violently crash together in my mind. He was not a greedy monster. He was a dying man. He had kept his terrible sickness a secret from the entire world. But I still did not understand the painful, cruel reason why. I looked deeper into the hidden compartment. Beside the medical papers, there was an old, digital video camera. My hands shook violently as I picked it up. The battery was surprisingly fully charged. I pressed the small play button and stared at the bright, glowing screen. The video started playing. A weak, thin man appeared on the screen. He was sitting in a hospital wheelchair, breathing heavily through a plastic oxygen tube. It took me a few seconds to recognize him. It was my strong, powerful father. He looked completely broken and fragile. "Hello, Leo," his weak voice scratched from the small speaker. "If you are watching this, you finally became successful enough to come looking for your revenge. I am so proud of you, my son. I know you hate me. I needed you to hate me completely." A single tear rolled down his sick face. The doctors told me the disease would quickly paralyze my entire body. I would become a heavy, useless piece of meat. You were a brilliant, young dreamer. I could not let you stay and watch me die slowly. "If I told you the sad truth, you would stay," he whispered painfully. "You would waste your beautiful youth feeding a sick old man and washing my dirty body. I refused to steal your bright future. I had to break your heart to make you fly away." I fell to my knees on the dirty concrete floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The cruel graduation day made perfect sense now. He destroyed my chair and kicked me out because it was the fastest, most effective way to cut the strong cord of love that tied us together. "I sold the shop and the family house," he continued, taking a painful breath. I took all our family money and created a fake, anonymous investment firm. I gave it all to you as your startup capital. I knew your anger would make you work incredibly hard. He had funded my entire empire. He had traded his business, his home, and his comfortable retirement to secretly buy my massive success. He died in absolute poverty, so I could live as a millionaire king. The heavy weight of his sacrifice crushed my soul completely. I am sorry I was so cruel, Leo, he cried quietly on the screen. But an eagle cannot learn to fly if the nest is too comfortable. I had to push you out of the tree. Please forgive a foolish old man who just loved his son. The video showed him trying to lift his weak, shaking hand to wave goodbye. The camera clicked and the screen went completely black. The silence in the dusty storage room was louder than a bomb. The villain of my story was actually my greatest, most silent guardian. I held the small video camera against my chest and screamed. I screamed in pure agony and endless regret. I had used my precious time hating him, while he spent his final, painful days sacrificing everything for my dreams. The dark truth broke me into pieces. The video camera suddenly beeped again. A second video file automatically started playing on the small screen. This video was not filmed in the hospital. It was filmed right here, inside this dark storage room. It showed my father slowly building the wooden chair I was touching. I watched in absolute awe and terrible pain. The video was a collection of short clips over a long time. In the first clip, he could still stand, but his hands were shaking violently. He struggled to hold a simple saw. His muscles were already failing terribly. In the next clip, he was sitting in a wheelchair. He had to tape the heavy tools directly to his weak hands just to carve the wood. He worked with intense, painful slowness. It was incredibly agonizing to watch a master carpenter lose his beautiful, natural physical control. A text appeared on the screen, Year 2. He was building this chair over many years. He spent 3 agonizing years cutting and sanding this single piece of furniture. He poured the very last drops of his fading life energy into copying my original, beautiful design perfectly. The video switched back to his tired face in the hospital room. He had one final secret to explain. You were probably angry when the banks rejected your loan applications, Leo, he whispered weakly. I am sorry I called them and ruined your credit history. I wiped the hot tears from my face, listening closely. You were young and desperate, he explained. If the banks gave you money, the high interest rates would eventually crush your business. I had to close every normal door to force you into my safe, anonymous trap. It was a brilliant, flawless strategy. He became the villain to protect me from greedy bankers. He blocked every dangerous path so I would walk directly into his hidden fortune. Every cruel action he took was carefully calculated to guarantee my ultimate, long-term safety and incredible success. I looked at the perfectly polished wooden chair in the center of the room. Every smooth curve and sharp edge was a silent scream of pure love. He did not build it to show off his skill. He built it to prove that he always respected my talent. This simple wooden chair was worth more than my entire multi-million-dollar corporation. It was built with dying muscles and an unbreakable father's spirit. I carefully wrapped my arms around the wooden backrest. I hugged the cold wood, wishing I could hug his warm, strong shoulders again. I stayed in that dusty room all night. I watched his video 10 times until the battery finally died. The anger that fueled my life for 7 years was completely gone. It was replaced by a deep, beautiful, and heartbreaking understanding of true, ultimate parental sacrifice. When the morning sun finally shined through the cracks in the metal door, I stood up. I gently picked up the beautiful wooden chair. It was time to leave this dark tomb. It was time to give the master carpenter the incredible respect he truly deserved. I placed the beautiful wooden chair carefully in my car. I drove directly to the city's public cemetery. I used the hospital records to find his final resting place. It was in the poorest, saddest section of the graveyard. There were no expensive marble stones or flowers here. I found his grave at the end of a muddy path. It was a simple dirt mound. He had given me millions of dollars, but he could not afford a real gravestone for himself. My heart broke again. But standing on the dirt was a wooden cross. I knelt in the wet mud to look at the cross. It was carved beautifully from rich, dark wood. I read the words carved deeply into the surface. Thomas, the proudest man in the world, because he was the father of Leo. I sobbed loudly, touching the letters. He asked me to carve that for him before he passed away, a quiet voice said behind me. I turned around in surprise. Standing in the rain was the old head carpenter. It was the loyal friend my father had cruelly fired on my graduation day many years ago. The old man smiled sadly and helped me stand up. He didn't fire me because he was angry, Leo, the carpenter explained softly. He fired me because I saw his hands shaking. He knew I would force him to go to the hospital. He needed absolute, total secrecy. He pushed everyone away to protect his master plan for you, the old man continued. But I found him in the hospital during his final weeks. I sat by his bed. He watched your success on television every single day. You were his greatest, most beautiful masterpiece. The old carpenter reached into his deep coat pocket. He pulled out a small, old, wooden tool. It was a traditional wood scraper. I recognized it immediately. It was my father's absolute favorite tool. He used it to make every piece of wood perfectly smooth and soft. He sold the factory and all his big machines, the carpenter said. But he refused to sell this one tool. He kept it hidden under his hospital pillow. He held this scraper tightly in his hand on the exact day he took his very last breath. The old man gently placed the wooden scraper into my trembling hands. The smooth handle felt incredibly warm, as if my father's spirit was still holding it. He wanted you to have this, the carpenter smiled. To smooth out the rough edges of your own brilliant life. I held the scraper tightly against my chest. I thanked the loyal old man for being a true friend to my father. I stood silently by the humble grave for a long time. The freezing rain washed away the last drops of my childish, foolish pride forever. I was no longer an angry boy trying to prove his worth. I was a man built by the ultimate sacrifice of a giant. I wiped my tears, bowed deeply to the wooden cross, and walked back to my car. I had one final, important task to complete. I drove back to the big city, returning to my massive, modern corporate skyscraper. The building was filled with glass, steel, and thousands of busy employees. I walked proudly through the bright lobby, carrying the simple wooden chair my father had built with his dying, paralyzed hands. My top executives stared at me in confusion. They were used to seeing me demanding perfection and shouting in meetings. Today, I was perfectly calm. I carried the wooden chair directly into the main executive boardroom. The large room was surrounded by huge glass windows overlooking the city. The long boardroom table was surrounded by 20 expensive, imported leather executive chairs. They represented extreme wealth and corporate power. I looked at the head of the table. "Remove that luxury chair," I calmly ordered my confused assistant. "Take it out of this room and throw it away immediately." The assistant quickly pulled the expensive leather chair away. I walked to the head of the long table. I gently placed my father's simple, wooden chair in the highest position of power. It looked completely different from the modern luxury of the room. It was perfectly, wonderfully out of place. The senior directors entered the room for our weekly meeting. They stopped at the door, surprised by the strange wooden chair at the head of the table. Some of them tried to ask questions, but I raised my hand for absolute silence. I stood beside the beautiful wooden seat. This chair was built by the greatest master carpenter who ever lived, I announced clearly to the quiet room. He built my entire empire from the dark shadows. He sacrificed his comfort, his reputation, and his life to ensure that we could all sit in this tall glass tower. From this day forward, nobody will ever sit in this seat, I declared with deep, unbreakable authority. This chair will remain permanently empty during every single meeting. It is reserved for the true founder of this corporation. It is reserved for my father, the silent guardian of my life. The executives nodded in quiet, deep respect. They sat down in their leather seats, leaving the head of the table completely empty. I sat in a normal chair next to it. I placed my father's old wooden scraper gently on the smooth glass table right in front of me. The angry, arrogant boy was finally gone. I led the corporate meeting with a new sense of calm, humble wisdom. Whenever a difficult decision had to be made, I looked at the empty wooden chair. I imagined my father sitting there, smiling proudly with his strong, working hands. True love does not always give you warm hugs or gentle words. Sometimes, true love breaks your heart to save your life. My father wore the ugly mask of a villain to give me the beautiful wings of a king. I will never forget his incredible, painful gift. The empty chair stands perfectly still in the busy room. It is a constant, silent reminder of the greatest sacrifice. A single piece of wood can build a home, but a father's invisible love can build an eternal empire. He is gone, but he is finally, truly respected.